Everyone, welcome. Good to see you all on. I'm going to give it a couple minutes just to let people join. We're talking about a really big topic today that one of the members of this community sent to me a couple months ago. So I've been sitting with it, thinking about it, talking to wise colleagues about it. So we're going to talk about how you stay calm and settled in the midst of such a divisive, I would say really toxic culture. How do we survive it? How do we thrive in the midst of so much division? So welcome everyone that's live with me today. I love that people jump on live. And then of course, if this conversation you feel like could be useful for someone else, we'll have it on YouTube later today. And yeah, and you can share it with people. And welcome, Margaret. Margaret was the member of our community who sent me this question. And Margaret, I really have been so consciously attempting to sit with it and listen in and kind of discern, any kind of wisdom that we might be able to bring forth. But I would really love to have you guys join in the conversation. So I'm going to attempt to watch my web chat with you all as we talk about this. So let me pull up my slides for today. Oh, sorry, they're not at the beginning here. And we're going to jump right in as people keep joining. I want to do one thing. I want to see if I can get my chat box up at the same time that I pull up my share screen. I think I can do this. I've done this before. Okay, maybe not. I'll just come in and out so that I can sort of watch, and I'll make sure that I read back at the end if any questions come up. So I only put this slide in there because I know every time we tend to have a couple new people that join. And so it's good to know maybe just a little bit about me. I definitely feel as if one of my main purposes in this lifetime, one of several, is to really bridge the sort of big psychologies of Western psychology and yoga. And I have a couple of things coming up that I want to mention before we go too deep into all of this. We're working on getting another grant to do a Tend Her 3.0, which would start this fall. It's going to be on resilience. As I talk to women, I'm realizing that what is really necessary as we've all come out of pretty traumatic times, how to really strengthen the muscle of resilience. So look for announcements for starting that sometime this fall. And then starting in February, for the second time, I'm going to offer this certification training on how you really do integrate yoga and psychology. This program tends to be mental health professionals, yoga teachers, or people that are really, sort of serious yogis and want more guidance on this deep mind-body connection. And then I also have a couple of retreats coming up. In fact, there are a couple spots left at the end of September if anyone wants to join me in Ireland at that castle. That's where we get to stay. Or you can come rewild with me in Costa Rica. Or you can come see one of the most sacred sites on earth, Machu Picchu, with me in October. So there's the website. That's the company I work with, if you're interested in any of those. And then, of course, I always have Wisdom Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of every month, 2 yoga classes a week, and then a weekly podcast. And this week, I'm actually very excited about this conversation. We're talking about the Barbie movie that just came out. And it is a really smart movie. And actually, my 11-year-old daughter has seen it 4 times already. It's been out like a week. And she has a small part in the podcast talking about her perceptions as an 11-year-old of this movie. So listen in this week. All right, so this is where we're going to go today in this particular Wisdom Wednesday. And again, I want to offer deep gratitude to Margaret for sending me a really thoughtful email about this question. She writes, this is sort of the first part of her query. How do we achieve inner calm and live in a loving and compassionate way with the divisive state of our world? So this is what I'm going to attempt to do today, talk a little bit about this divisive world. I really feel like it's so enlightening for us to understand our brains and why we go into fear, separation, and self-sabotage, why we also go into so much judgment of others. So we're going to do just a little quick neuroscience understanding of our brain. And when I started to really understand this, it takes off so much sort of pressure off yourself when you just understand, oh, there's a lot of wiring going on here. We're going to talk about how, though, we can overcome some of that wiring. Where is the best place to get informed? And this is not a news channel or a news source, but where we should find our best information. And then a distillation of years and years of conversation with my mentor, Dr. Candida Maurer, about the three things that she believes we can really trust in life. So I'm excited to sort of end the conversation with that. All right, so we can all agree that it is a very divisive world. There's gender inequality, there's racial inequality. Certainly there's political polarization. We can't seem to find middle ground. Hate crimes have reached all-time highs. Our news is a constant loop of negativity. And I read something very interesting recently that the US News and World Report surveyed Americans, and more than 80% of us believe that our country is super divided along racial, ethnic, political lines. And so it's sort of like, how do we ever come together? One of the teachers that I've studied with for a long time, a spiritual teacher, always talks about this earth, this planet that we're on, as an earth school, and that it's a challenging school. This isn't a school that is easy. And part of the reason it's so challenging is it's an opportunity for us to really evolve and to grow. But it's not without a lot of hard knocks and a lot of challenge. So at least how I added this too. Not only do we have all this going on, but of course we all have, or many of us have, deep fears about the state of our planet and the warming of the planet and just ecologically what's going on. So I certainly feel like I often will go into this space of survival mode. And I think many people experience this as well, where we feel overwhelmed, sad. We feel scared. We also feel like we're never doing enough. We can't ever get ahead. But what I would say from this sort of survival mode that we're in is that the base, like the foundational emotion that's consistently there, is fear. So I think sort of at the heart of all the division we see in the world, whether it's in families or in governments or in workplaces, the division is always coming from fear. So we're going to get into that. And you'll sort of see that anger and sadness usually come out of fear. But if we're having a lot of anger, if we keep digging deeper and deeper, we will inevitably, I believe, always come to fear. So I want to explain just from a little bit. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I took a lot of neuropsychology classes in graduate school, and I find it very interesting for us to understand human behavior. And I want us to just in this brief little section understand why maybe we are caught in so much fear, anger, survival mode because of this division and what it's doing to our brains. So the bottom line is all of us, every human who walks on this planet, we are wired for survival. Our brain is wired to try to keep us alive. And because we are wired for survival, there's lots of things going on. And one of the first things that's well established, and I've talked about this a lot, is our brain is always and will be wired towards negativity. So we don't actually see the world as it is. We see the world through sort of this negative lens as a way to keep us alive. So we will always overestimate threats. So you can think of some of the threats you feel in your life or some of the global threats that we all see and fear. We're always going to overestimate those because of the way our brain functions. We're also going to underestimate opportunities / hope. We're also going to underestimate the resources we have maybe to figure out some of these big problems. So I just want to start by reminding us, and we in my home talk about the negativity bias a lot, and we'll call each other out. I think you're in negativity bias right now. And this is essential just for us to know that it actually is going to take us a little extra effort and work for us to actually move through negativity into more hope, into more love. It actually takes effort, right? Our brain is always going to go towards possible ramifications, possible downsides as a way to keep us alive. Now, the second thing, in addition to negativity bias that our brain does, is that when our brain goes into high states of emotion, and really specifically what I'm talking about here is anger and fear, our frontal cortex basically gets disabled. And our frontal cortex is our capacity to think through problems, our capacity to be mentally clear, analytical. And so when we go into major fear states, which I think happens when we look at this divisive world, we can't actually, we're not as connected to the part of our brain that can help us solve things. So essentially, when we're angry or when we're scared, it diminishes our ability to be intelligently discerning. And in addition to that, if you look at what our media does, anger makes a lot of money for media moguls. And anger is memorable. We kind of know this during political season, that the hate ads tend to be more present than the positive ads because all the research shows that they impact people more, people remember them more. So when we are in anger or hate, there's a lot of adrenaline that comes with it. And adrenaline is like a drug. The stronger the anger, the more adrenaline we have, and the more certain we are that we're right. So anger definitely keeps us in this divisive place and really just disconnects from being able to clearly think through both sides or think through issues. And then the final and third thing I want to talk about in terms of our brain is something called the default mode network, the DMN. And this is fairly new research. I think it was the early 2000s where psychology researchers, when they were asking people in studies to do nothing, actually that's not possible. People's brains are always doing something. So when we're not in a task that requires us to be intellectually present. So, if we're doing our taxes or doing something related to work, we're very much in the present because it takes our mental capacity staying in the present. But if we're just sort of in resting mode, not needing to focus on something specific, our brain goes into this default mode network. So it's more in the downtime. And these are the different areas of the brain that are lit up that get impacted. But essentially what happens, researchers are finding that when our brain is resting, we actually go back. These parts of the brains contain autobiographical memories, which essentially we go back to our past. And we review our past as a way to try to predict our future so that we can survive, so that we can stay safe. So again, we are wired to try to survive. But this default mode network keeps us safe, but it doesn't necessarily keep us happy. And that's what's being researched right now, is that the more time people spend in default mode network, there's some relationship to more depression, more negative mood states. And so there's also interesting queries going on in the science about how do we override this autopilot and maybe take control again of our thoughts and our mood and our attitude in our life? So they are finding there's some interventions that can help quiet or modulate this default mode network. Look at what's on there: meditation, yoga, physical activity, sleep, of course, psychotherapy, and psychedelics. So that's a whole nother conversation that maybe we should have in a future Wisdom Wednesday, because there's lots of interesting things going on with that. So what I find really interesting about this is this idea that, yes, our world is very divisive, but it's also possible that our brains are processing it as far worse and far more divisive than maybe it actually is, and making us feel even more caught in fear and as if things aren't in our control. Fear tells us that things are out of control. And what we forget is that actually we're also wired for love. We're also wired for connection. We're also wired for empathy. We're also wired for listening. We also have this capacity to relate to other people. We are more alike than we are different. And so, but these compassionate, courageous places of being able to stay in an open heart, I would say that they're going to take you more effort than your natural state of trying to survive, your brain's natural state of trying to survive, which is always going to take you towards more fear and towards more negativity. So one of the things that has helped me so much, and this comes from yoga philosophy, and I've talked about this before, but it definitely bears repeating. When I learned about this very ancient sort of philosophy from the 7th century, it's so aligned with psychological research. It's so aligned with my understanding of human nature. And it also simplified it for me. And it also put it in the body, which I had never seen done in any, sort of modern day psychological research. So I want to talk about these 3 ways that all humans self-sabotage. This isn't just one of us. This is all of us. And we actually never necessarily get out from under these. We're going to keep repeating these patterns of self-sabotage, but there are ways to clear them for a while until they come back again, okay? So a mala is translated as a covering of the soul. And so this silly picture here, there's your body. There are 3 different malas. One lives, the orange cloud lives over your pelvis. The green heart lives over your heart. And sort of that, I guess it could be like the internet signal, is your headspace. So we get very veiled or covered, or we could think of it as like the dust that just accumulates on furniture that doesn't get dusted. Life is just going to bring dust. Life is just going to bring dirt. And it's our job to keep cleansing and purifying ourselves so we can actually not be stuck in that survival reptilian brain, and instead be able to live in more hope and live in more positivity and live in more compassion. So I want to talk individually about each of these because, again, for me, it's been one of the aspects of yoga philosophy that has been most impactful for me. So we're going to work our way from the base of the spine, that pelvis, that orange cloud, up to the headspace, because the question that Margaret gave to me about, we're in a divisive place. It's very polarized. That is all headspace stuff. So we're going to end with really understanding that self-sabotage, constriction that is in our head. But we have to start at the pelvis. So the pelvis, the veil or the covering or the dust or the dirt, however we want to conceptualize it, what we call the mala that lives in our pelvis, it's called karma mala. And essentially it's fear. It's fear of rejection. It's fear of abandonment. It's fear of lack. We feel very powerless when we're stuck and sort of veiled by this form of self-sabotage. There tends to be a lot of shame that accompanies karma mala. excuse me, there tends to be a lot of fear. It's not as much shame. It's mostly fear that stays with karma mala. And when we are in so much fear, and I think we can all relate to this, we can get really paralyzed and stuck. So because fear puts us into the amygdala, instead of those frontal lobes where we can actually think through things and make plans and figure out how we want to do this, instead we're stuck in fear, we're stuck in panic, we get really stuck, right? It's hard for us to take action. And sometimes when I read too much news or I get too caught up in the politics of the time, I definitely feel myself go into freeze mode. Like, oh my God, this is so big. How do we get through this? What part do I play? How can I help? It's, fear is such a part of that experience for me that often I don't take action. I don't write my senators. I don't, because I'm so overwhelmed with the fear accompanying it. So, and if this constriction or this self-sabotage called karma mala stays around, we don't clear it out, we do tend to potentially move towards anxiety that stays. So what I love about this philosophy is not only does it define it so beautifully, it gives us tools to clear it. So if these three sort of constrictions or self-sabotaging behaviors that we all as humans are going to get stuck in, how do we clear it? How do we cleanse? How do we purify? There's guidance for that. And specifically for this fear that lives in our pelvis, again, the yoga texts say we got to deal with the physical, the energetic, and the mental. Physically, you got to work with your hips. You got to standing poses, be in your legs, get grounded, all of that stuff to bring the energy down is really essential. Long exhales, that deep diaphragmatic breathing into the belly, into the pelvis, that starts to soften and lessen that anxious fear that can come up. And then mentally, like, what do we do? Well, we have to learn to take action. So even though there's fear, we have to work toward getting out there, putting ourselves out there, taking action, opening to the fact that there is a flow in life. And the phrase that sums this up is, even though we're scared, can we turn toward curiosity? Can we be curious? It's very interesting. The sensation in the body of anxiety or fear and excitement register the same way. So I always tell my kids this before they're going in to a performance. They're all in acting and music, and you have to be on stage. And I'll often hear them say, I'm having butterflies, I'm really nervous. And I remind them, yeah, I understand you're nervous. And it also might be a sign that you're really excited. You're really excited to perform. You're really excited to show all the hours you put into this. So curiosity, I feel like, is one of the deepest, most beautiful balms for anxiety and fear. Can we just open our mind to be curious about what is going to unfold? All right, so that's the first way we self-sabotage, is we get stuck in fear. The second way we self-sabotage is, this mala is called Anava mala, and it lives in the heart. And this is the feeling of shame. This is the feeling of, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough, right? And so we start to contract in. And of course, the more contracted we get in, we're really stuck in ourselves. And we're really, again, very disconnected. So we can think of the malas as all the ways we self-sabotage and disconnect. So the way we work with this tendency to not feel worthy or not feel like we're enough, or we can actually do anything, that we're really stuck in our own smallness, is working with opening the heart. Work with more energizing breath, like Kapalabhati. From a mental place, we have to learn to reach out. We have to, when we're stuck inward like this, our biggest task is to reach out, to ask for help, to go talk with other people, to be engaged in community, to connect to others, which allows us to stay connected to ourselves. And with this self-sabotaging behavior, we have to turn towards compassion, because when we're stuck in here in sadness, in grief, as I was talking about this topic with my mentor, we were having a really deep conversation about this. She really said, you know, when we look at all the divisiveness in the world, there's so much grief. She's like, you know, I find myself sometimes moving towards just crying when I read the news. And you might also be that. So I think we have fear when we look at the divisive nature of life. We also have a lot of sadness, if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of grief about just the horrific things that happen, not only out there, but also in here, the horrific things we say to ourselves. So Anavamala is not only about compassion towards the world and others, but compassion towards self. So this all leads, right? So we have this constriction or contraction in our pelvis, which is fear. We have this constriction or contraction in our heart, which is sort of sadness, grief, depression, unworthiness. And then we have this constriction in our head. And this is really, really, really at the heart of anger and divisiveness that we're seeing in our world. But it is absolutely related to these other two. They're all interconnected. So if you're stuck in fear, you're stuck in disconnect, sadness in the heart, right? It's also impossible to be clear in your headspace, clear in your mind. So the contraction that happens in our mind is called Mala, and it is comparison. It is black and white thinking. It is prejudice. It is why there is gender inequality, why there is racial inequality, why certain nations feel that they're better than other nations. This is all Mala. This is the idea of when we are contracted in our head, when we are stuck in this self-sabotaging behavior, we otherize. And I learned this term this week, otherize, meaning we think that we're right and good and that others are bad. So as soon as we're otherizing, saying, we're good, we got this figured out, they're the ones who are all wrong, we can be sure that our mind has been hijacked by Mala, right? So there's so much criticism, there's so much judgment when we're hijacked by Mala. And so the effects of it are anger, bitterness, cynicism, right? Superiority complex. I'm better off. They're worse off. So rejection is a major piece of Mayamalas. We keep rejecting others, which is then in essence a rejection of ourselves, because we are all interconnected. So when we reject others, we are essentially also in turn rejecting ourselves. So this is at the heart of divisiveness. And I've always said, when I've taught on these malas before, and we get to this one, I say to understand Mala, all you have to do is look at politics. And this is what politics is: black and white, red, blue, right? Like we have a really hard time finding that middle ground. This is the definition of Mala. So how do we overcome it? And this is how we overcome it in ourselves. And this is one of my main points today, is we have to work on ourselves. I know, it can be frustrating. So these are ways we can clear that mental self-sabotage of othering, right? I'm better, they're worse, I'm better, vice versa. Physically, inversions, chanting, meditation, again, more of an energetic breath to kind of clear out the anger. But mentally, can we trust others just to be who they are? Can we trust that each of us are on our own karmic path? And the things that we have to experience and understand and learn from in this lifetime are not going to look exactly like our neighbor, are not going to look exactly like our best friend or even members of our family. So giving people the space to be themselves and figure things out on their own, just as we would hope they would give us that space as well. So Mayimala comes with a lot of acceptance, comes with a lot of non-judgment, and it's all about turning towards courage because it takes a lot of courage. Can you imagine if a bunch of our politicians had the courage to say, I'm not going to be so polarized. I'm going to try to come to the middle, and I'm going to try to find this sort of middle ground and allow us to kind of listen and talk and communicate and figure some things out. But it takes courage. Again, fear keeps us away from being able to use those frontal lobes to really be in the space of holding what, spiritual traditions often call the tension of opposites. Life is not black and white. There are not clear answers. It's very complicated. So many of these spiritual traditions talk about, can you hold all of it? Can you hold that there's hate and that there's love? Can you hold that there's light and that there's dark? Can you hold that there's confusion and there's clarity, that we contain all of these things? Can you hold all of it? So to sum up what these self-sabotaging constrictions that we all experience, that we all go through over and over, and that we can also clear, we must be turning towards more compassion, turning towards more curiosity, and turning towards more courage. It's sort of like the 3 C's. Can we seek to be in compassion, curiosity, and courage? Does that help us navigate a little easier so much of this divisiveness in the world? All right. Feel like I want to pause here for a moment because I am so curious to know the chats. Okay, there's not as many as I thought. Feel free to, but I'm going to go back to where I was. I got a little bit more to share here. All right. So Margaret, in this email that she sent me, your first question was, how do we stay calm and centered in the midst of such a divisive world? And then she went on to really share, and I so appreciated this, and I so related to it, how angry she can feel. She said, I can feel so angry when I look and feel like, why am I the one who's doing all this work to try to be in my centeredness and my compassion? And I look elsewhere and they're not doing the work, right? This is such a great question, right? Does anyone else feel this sometimes? What? Betsy's always talking about our inner work, right? And the deal is how beautiful that you all 70 of you on right now that are live with me would not be on this call if you weren't somewhat interested in doing your inner work, and you weren't somewhat interested in awakening and being in a more expansive place in your mind and your heart and your pelvis, right? So beautiful. Yes, we are doing our work, right? And it looks slightly different for all of us. I always say, trust the process for yourself. What my internal work looks like is going to look different than other people's, but we're all being called to clear out of so much of the conditioning and the negativity and the cynicism and the storylines and the traumas that we grew up with or we inherited. We have to do the work. And thank goodness that there are people out there like all of you, I'm bowing towards you right now, that are willing to do the work, We need people to do the work. And I feel like I shared this in one of my past Wisdom Wednesdays. It actually takes a very small percentage of people to sort of change the tide. And I can't remember the exact data on it. I feel like it was like 7 to 10%. I know my meditation teacher, Dr. Deepak Chopra, his goal was always to get 1 million people to meditate. He felt like if 1 million people would start to meditate regularly, that would start to shift the tide for the rest of the population. So yeah, it is hard. One of my favorite quotes about this is from Dr. Shefali Tisbari. She says, ignorance is bliss. Waking up is a bitch, right? So yes, the awakening process the inner work, looking at your shadow, dealing with your own bullshit. It is not work that is necessarily easy, but it's important work. And I believe it's why we're here. I believe we're all here to evolve and to grow and to expand and to help, to be of service in this world. So thank you for doing the work. So what do we do in all of this divisiveness? When you turn on the news, when you read things, when you see the world, when you hear people talking, what do we do? How do we work with it? So as I sat, so Margaret sent me this question 2 months ago, and I printed it off and I carried it in my bag for 2 months. And every now and again, I would get a little insight and I would write it down. And then I spent last week a couple hours with my mentor sort of talking through this, like talking through, what do you think about this? And really where I came to is that there has to be this acceptance. And I've been saying this for a long time. Our culture is toxic. Our world is toxic. So if you choose to align with majority culture, you're choosing to align with a lot of toxicity. And it's pretty impossible, I believe, to stay centered, settled, calm, compassionate, and okay. Sorry about that. So because we live in so much toxicity, we have to, again, and because our brains go towards so much negativity, we have to really be doing the inner work so that we can settle into the wise self, the clarity, the wisdom, the guidance that we all contain. It's not just one of us. Every single one of us contains wisdom and guidance for our own path. So I really believe we have to work, and this is why we're all doing the work, or why maybe you're thinking about doing the work, or you're starting this process of doing the work, is that we have to be able to have our true north as ourself. So we must learn to trust ourself over the world. And this is not easy because our intuitive wise self might suggest one thing, whereas other people or the world suggests something else. So I will give you an example. This feels very vulnerable for me to share, but I'm going to share. I actually do not really follow very much news. And the world and people around me tell me, you need to follow this. You need to know what's going on. And as I keep tuning into myself, I also hear, like, you'll learn what you need to learn. You know, something really major is happening. You're going to learn it. And it takes, so as an empath, as a highly sensitive, empathic person, it's really detrimental to my mental health. So I'm very careful about how much I take in. And I try to spend more time in here with myself, listening to my inner instincts and wisdom versus allowing the world. I also do not spend very much time at all on social media, as my social media assistants can attest to. They get somewhat frustrated with me at times because the world tells me a lot of things about how I should be, how I should look, what I should think about, what I should be drawn to, what I should do. And as a very sensitive person, I can be highly suggestible. I know that about myself. So I choose instead to be in more spacious time with myself, which is why I'm not so great at returning messages right away, because I can feel very pulled back and forth. So the way I do it is going to look different than the way you do it. I'm just suggesting, can you spend more time in connection with yourself than as much connection with the world? Because answers, guidance, I actually believe that so many of the problems we're facing, if more of us were going inward and listening and being quiet, we would start to be able to download, sense into, feel, come up with solutions. But if we're stuck in fear and judgment and anger, we're not in our frontal lobes. We're not able to really sense in and feel what might be a more positive path forward. I love this quote by Henry Thoreau: read not the times, read the authorities. So some of trusting yourself means you may need to retreat away from all the news. You may need to spend more time in solitude. You may need to figure out what your inner sanctuary looks like. And that's why we have to do the work. Because if we're pretty toxic internally, meaning we're still stuck in old trauma, we're still carrying a lot of challenge, right? We do have to do our inner work, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's therapy, whether it's reading books, whether it's journaling, whether it's support groups, whether it's getting sober. We have to figure out what our path is to clear some of the gunk out so that we actually can hear that inner voice a little bit more. So, what are the things you can trust? So if you're going inward, if you're sort of taking the stance of like, I want to learn to trust myself more than trust the world, what are the things that we can trust? And I want to say that these ideas are the ideas of my mentor, Dr. Canada Maurer, psychologist, a long-term sort of expert in mind-body work, psychedelic medicine. She's a force of nature for sure. And over her many, many years of inner work and clinical practice, she said to me, I really think there's 3 things you can trust in life. You can trust your body, right? Your body does not lie. Our bodies are not capable of lying. Our bodies tell us truth. When our bodies are ill, they let us know. When our bodies feel good, they let us know. And so really doing the work of embodiment, listening in, being in contact with the body and taking such precious care of the body, we can trust what the body is, what guidance the body's giving us. We can also trust our dream life. So dreams are direct messaging from our subconscious mind, which is also sometimes called the wise mind. And so doing your own sort of inner dream work and sort of watching what symbols come up, watching what themes arise. These are, and I've done almost a decade worth of dream work for myself. And it's phenomenally powerful to really work with dreams because they're constantly giving you truth that you can trust. And then the third thing my mentor said that she thinks you can trust is synchronicities. So I would define synchronicities as things that just sort of happen in life, being in the right place at the right time, hearing the title of a book, like this happened to me this week. Have been really working with a new topic of study, and I listened to a podcast, and then there was another podcast that it linked to, and I went on to that podcast, and there was this book that like has everything in it that I've been wanting to learn. And that felt like a synchronicity. Right? It felt like, oh, wow, this is exactly what I needed in the right moment. Thank you. So these are the moments of life where we feel like, wow, I'm being somewhat guided. I can really trust the process of my life. And we can't plan synchronicities, right? They happen, but we can awaken to them. We can open our eyes to the fact that they're actually happening all the time. And by the word synchronicity was first coined by Carl Jung in the early 1900s. He talked about this sort of, so people have been aware of this for a very long time. So you might even just take a moment to acknowledge what are the synchronicities in my life, right? What are those moments where I met the right person or the right job landed or something shifted in me, or right? These are aspects of life that we can trust. We can't maybe trust CNN or other news outlets. I'm not picking on CNN. But we can trust these things, and we can trust sort of this inner instinct. So once we sort of accept that, yes, okay, I am going to do the inner work. Yes, I am going to work to clear things out so I can be in more connection with my deep wisdom, maybe my dream life, my intuitive nature, the synchronicities of my life, my heart. Then I do believe it is on us, those who are awakening, to be bridge builders, right? So this is why we do the inner work. We don't do the inner work just so we can stay inside of ourselves and feel good. We are all here, I believe, in service to this planet, to this world. It's the idea, and you can watch the Wisdom Wednesday of this. This was a couple months ago. We talked about life purpose, duty, dharma. We all have a reason. We all have sort of a unique combination of skills and talents and knowings and understandings that it's our job to offer to the world. So as we do this inner work, as we sort of understand how to be of service, we need to be bridge builders in this divisive culture, in this planet. This is, I think, part of the responsibility that comes with a conscious person. So yes, it can appear to be more ignorance is bliss. It can appear to be more blissful to be a little numbed out and ignorant. And yet I actually believe that our job is to awaken and then choose where we want to be of service. So here's some ideas about how to be a bridge builder. You first have to decide what is in your power to change. And I'll give you a little hint. We can change our thoughts and our feelings, and that's about it. Right? So we can change our perspective, how we're thinking about something, and we can change our feelings. There's a lot of other stuff we can't change, but we can change. And I actually think when we change our thoughts and our feelings, we change our energy, right? We change our vibration, we change our frequency, which makes a big impact in the world. And there's phenomenal research on this, right? This idea of like our energy, our frequency, our nervous system does impact other people's nervous systems. So if we move into the world solid, steadfast, calm, because we're doing the inner work, we're working to soften our default mode network, we're meditating, we're working with compassion, courage, curiosity. Just our presence sometimes can be liberating for other people. So decide what is in your power to change and work with that. I also believe as bridge builders, we must respect the richness of personal choice. So even though we believe what other people should believe, can we actually allow them the space to believe what they need to believe? To allow people to walk their own path, their dharmic path, the lessons they need to live out in this lifetime, versus putting our agenda, our belief systems. And I fall into this too, right? When people have political views that are really extremely different than mine, I so go into judgment and anger. It's happened recently, right? But really seeing if we can just let everybody respect the richness of personal choice. Now, I'm not saying when personal choice is going to be very harmful to other people, right? But people have the right to decide how they want to think and how they want to feel. That's what we all have the power to change. I also think as bridge builders, we have to learn to listen. Listening is such a powerful tool, just listening. And I feel like when we listen, we are able to feel the humanity and the shared humanity between us. I remember a dinner, this was several years ago, a friend and a different friend, they had vastly different political beliefs. And I remember I watched in amazement as my friend just decided to listen. She was interviewing this man, like, can you just explain that to me? Why do you believe that? And yeah, I want to know more. And it was actually, I was making the dinner and bringing food out. So I was just listening, but it was such again, it's still in my memory that can we actually just engage in dialogue and listen? And then as I stated earlier, curiosity, compassion, courage. And then I do think if we are on this path of awakening, awareness, consciousness, living in more light, you got to find your people. You have to find your people, right? Because if we are primarily around people where they're stuck in negativity bias, there's a lot of anger, fear, we are going to be impacted by that. Doesn't matter how much like bubbling up we do or how much prayers we put out, or right? Energetically, you will get zapped if you are in situations with people who you feel like you're at odds with all the time. It's exhausting, you know? So either we need to learn to retreat and go in and take care of ourselves, but I actually absolutely feel like we have to find community. We have to find people who we can feel safe with, who we can feel seen with, we can feel heard. This to me feels like a big part. And then I think when we feel like we're energetically filled up, then we have more energy to be of service in a broken world, to be of service in listening, creating more bridges, creating more connection. But we also need to get filled up. And that's why I think when you find your people, you find community, you find people who see you, hear you, love you, this is key. So I want to end with today, this idea of alchemy. You know, the alchemists were able to turn lead into gold, or so the idea goes. And I recently read a definition of alchemy that I really like. It's just the transformation of the energy of fear into the power of love. And we hear this a lot. Love trumps fear. Love is more powerful than fear. And I actually really do honestly believe that that's the case. But we have to put extra effort into love, into compassion, into courage, into curiosity, because if we just sort of are on the treadmill of the negativity bias, of the default mode network, we're going to be in fear and anger. So yes, it is work. I guess my final comment is it's work. It's work to turn and transform the energy of fear into the power of love. But I think it's why we're all here. I think it's why we're all here. That was exhausting, y'all. That was a lot of thinking put into this. So I have 8 minutes left. It's amazing. I was not able to have my chat box up while I was talking. And so I want to take a look at these chats, but please put questions, comments. I might not get to all of them, but as I go through this. Okay. The first one I'm seeing here is, how do I begin to let go of my anger and negativity towards self? And what I would say, Jennifer, is it's most likely there's no easy way. There's no one way. I have harbored a lot of anger and shame towards myself for a long time. And so I would say it's a progressive, consistent work. I might turn you towards self-compassion work. There's an amazing book by Kristen Neff on self-compassion. And in fact, the first Tend-Her we did was on self-compassion. And Jennifer, if you go to yogamama.com, I think there's free access to that 4-week self-compassion course, but it's a practice like anything else. Like, I don't think we reach a finish line of like, oh, my self-anger and my negativity towards self is gone. But it's like consistent work on letting ourselves be seen and known. And some of the things that have helped me have been therapy, have been yoga, working it out of my body, right? Working the tension and the trauma out of my body, out of my physical tissue has been really effective. And also self-care, like devoting time to yourself. That is such an act of self-love, right? Where I think often it's so easy to give to other people and to children and to workplace. And when you put time aside consistently for yourself, you're giving yourself a really big message that you're important, you count, I love you, I'm caring for you. I could probably just talk on that question for a while, but I'm going to end there. Thank you, Kathy Pagano, who's also been a dear mentor to me. Initiation into consciousness is really hard work. Amen, sister. But it's well worth it. It will definitely bring light into the world, and that's exactly what our world needs. Doug talks about discussions with cousins who just went to a Trump Republican rally. They don't want to hear anything against that, how to deal with them. I'm also wondering if this is where we come in with listening, we come in with compassion, we come in with curiosity. If someone's not going to change their viewpoints, but they know your viewpoint is different, sometimes just, again, our own energy and our willingness to be open and listen can be powerful. Heather, I think it's great that you are trying to spread more hope. But yes, there's a lot of negativity out there. So that's why we have to find our people. We have to be around people who also want to spread more hope. Yes, Nicole, the yoga text that discussed the malas, it comes from Kashmir Shaivism. Let me see if I can write that in. It's from the 7th century. Kashmir Shaivism. That might give you, there are some decent, I can't think of any of the core text off the top of my head, but if you type in Kashmir Shaivism malas, you should get to some more information about them. Okay. Can you touch on jealousy? Yeah. So, first of all, it's so interesting that we get jealous of other people because we actually don't know what their life is like. It's all projection. We believe that that person who lives in that house must have a happier life, but we have no way of knowing that. So again, we're caught up in that comparison. Jealousy is Maya Mala. It's the head mala. It's the comparison. It's they must have it better off than I do. I'm worse off. But I think that there is a seed of benefit to jealousy. And the seed of benefit I see to jealousy is that jealousy is a great way for you to see what you really want. And it's really hard for us in general to know what we want, right? It's actually a really hard thing to come up with, like, I want this. And so whoever we're jealous of, it's actually a really useful activity to really spend some time figuring out, why am I so jealous of this person? What am I projecting onto them that I believe they have, the qualities they contain, how they move through the world? I'm jealous of that. It must mean there's something in what I'm projecting onto them that I actually want. So can I develop that in myself? All right, thanks y'all for all your great comments. I love it. I love it. I love it. Margaret says, I'm glad you shared about not watching the news all the time. Thank you. I actually have to say that I could already feel, even after I said that, I could feel like a little vulnerability hangover in myself, sort of like, oh, am I going to be judged now as one of those people that's super disconnected? So, it's interesting, right? But I saw several comments of people saying, thank you. I'll work on not feeling so guilty. The other thing about our news, it's like, used to news just came out once a day, and now it's like there all the time. And it's also, these news moguls are working on the anger and the fear in us because that keeps us reading. So I think it's helpful to figure out for yourself how, if it does really impact you, how to minimize how much you take in or how you take it in. Again, I feel like the really big stuff that I do want to know about is getting talked about by friends and family and people around me. And then I can go learn more. But for my own nervous system, it's been really helpful. Finding our people definitely is a way of othering. Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. Oh, Ben. Ben, I love it. I actually had that in my notes because I somewhere found that quote this week by Teddy Roosevelt. Comparison is the thief of joy. Amen. I really love that too, right? So when we're in that Maya Mala, when we're in comparing, they have it better off, they have it worse off. We've got it figured out as Democrats, those Republicans, they're horrible, right? Yeah, that comparison just sucks all the joy out of us. So thank you for bringing that up. All right. It looks like there are lots of comments, lots of thoughts about all of this. So maybe we can pinky promise, all of us, that we will keep doing our inner work. We will keep moving towards more consciousness and awareness, whatever that means for us. It's going to look different for all of us. And that we'll keep turning towards compassion, courage, and curiosity. And that we increase our own inner light, then we bring that light into the world. And it really does start to make some of these shifts that sometimes feel so impossible. Like, how is this world going to shift? Well, we have to shift us. That's what we have responsibility for. And as our light gets brighter, that bright light is going to go out into the world. So keep doing it. All right. Thank you, Margaret, for the question. I can't say that every question that comes my way, I'll answer, but I really liked the challenge of sitting with it for a couple months and really thinking about it. So if anyone else has some burning questions, first of all, I would say go in because your answers are going to be in you. But if, there's some things you would like all of us to kind of hone in on in one of these Wisdom Wednesdays, let me know. And please share this if there are other people you feel like this would be a helpful, useful conversation for them to listen in on. Please share. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. And Shelley, I'm so glad that you felt more calm and centered. Yep, that's beautiful. That's that entrainment, right? When we spend time with other people that are settled and centered and calm, we energetically merge into that energy, which is why we need to stay as much as far away as we can from too much fear and anger, because we will entrain to that as well. So, all right. Love to all of you. If you want to come to Ireland with me in September, let me know. Otherwise, maybe Costa Rica or online, or maybe Peru, or maybe one of these upcoming programs. But I'll see you next month, first Wednesday in September for our next Wisdom Wednesday. All right. Stay well.